Ah, I see how it is. NECA makes a Godzilla in 1954. So of course that's just MonsterArts makes in 1954.
Well, yeah. Somebody's gotta show you whippersnappers how it's done.
Oh! Shut up, GMK. Nobody likes you.
But I thought everybody liked me.
You know, for being such a scary looking Godzilla, you sure do cry more than people that went to see the 98 Godzilla movie. Anyways, back to the task at hand. You were just scared that my company finally made a good Godzilla figure, and you just couldn't handle that.
You said a good figure? That's still debatable.
Guys, calm down. Can we all just like the figures that we want to like?
No!
Hey guys, welcome to Super Important Reviews. My name's Steve, and today we're going over the Aussie MonsterArts Godzilla 1954 from Bandai and Tamashii Nation. If you guys don't know which Godzilla this is, and that's kind of shame on you, but anyways, just kidding. But he is from the original film Godzilla. You also might know it as Godzilla with Raymond Burr or Gojira, which I do prefer the Japanese version, but the Raymond Burr one still kind of has its own merits. I'm rambling. Anyways, he's from the original Godzilla film in 1954. It was a black and white film, which is why the figure is done in a black and white style, and is a film that is widely considered a masterpiece in the kaiju community and just in films in general. It is that good. If you guys haven't seen it, definitely recommend going to check it out. And especially the Japanese version, because that film is freaking haunting as all hell, and I definitely recommend giving it a look. Which is actually why I picked up this figure, because I do really love the 1954 suit, and then I just love MonsterArts in general, so anytime they put out a new sculpt, I just generally tend to snag those guys up. And I do have a lot of representation of this guy in my collection with Bandai vinyls, Bear model. I don't have an X-Plus of this guy, sadly. Odd. But I do also have the NECA version, which we will compare in this video. I won't go hardcore over each individual little detail, but I will give you guys my pretty much opinions on where both of these figures lie in your collecting. And I'm just really excited to get this guy out of his cardboard prison. Well, actually, I kind of already got him out a little while back, but he needs to be released again. So, without further ado, for his packaging, really love the overall appearance on the front. I actually think it has this really nice foreboding kind of haunting atmosphere with the black in the background with the figure right here. Looks really awesome. It's a very contrasting image here, especially with the slashes, and you can see the figure on the inside. With also just having very mild colors with the bright red here with the Godzilla 1954, Bandai Tamashii Nation. Side of the box, you get Godzilla in a nice frontwards position. Top of the packaging, got it upside down by MonsterArts Godzilla 1954. Other side, not too much else going on that we haven't previously seen. And for the back of the packaging, you just get Godzilla in some dynamic poses, getting ready to stomp on some military vehicles, some stuff I can't understand, and some legal mumbo jumbo, but you get another picture of Godzilla looking up here at the bottom, which is actually kind of neat to say the least, because this is the part of the packaging that you're not going to really be seeing, and it even has this nice little glossy shine to it. So that's pretty cool. So let's get this guy open up out of his cardboard prison. Alright, so now that we have Godzilla open up out of his cardboard prison, he's decided that he needs to take a nap. Because this is the lazy Godzilla in my collection, I guess. And I think it's actually really cool you can get him in this little laying down position like he's affected by the oxygen destroyer. Or maybe he's actually swimming around in Tokyo Bay, getting ready to do some Jaws actions for you. Actually, no, I'm just gonna get this guy to stand up for us, because our King of the Monsters needs to be up and raring and ready to go to take out Tokyo. But for this kaiju, he comes with 0 accessories, which is a little bit of a bummer, because I would have really liked to have seen some kind of breath effect for this guy. Now, I kind of understand why he doesn't come with one, because the way his mouth is designed, with his teeth, he has these fangs on the front here, which I'll show you guys in a little bit closer detail in just a sec. But I imagine that would get in the way of a breath effect a lot. Now, they probably could have worked it out to actually have it just kind of like come out of his mouth like in a cone. Would have been really cool. Or maybe even just gave us a reissue of the 64 Emergence version breath. Maybe with just a little bit of a different color scheme. That would have been fantastic for this figure and gave it a little bit more variety than what we got with the NECA release of the 54. But with the GMK and most standard Godzilla releases that we get, usually the first one doesn't come with anything, so it's understandable. But we're going to move into a closer look at his details. So first we'll go over the Big G's face here, which overall I really like the sculpt for the head. I think that they did a really fantastic job with what they had here. With his slightly elongated ears, really like the trademark brow of the 54. His nose looks really nice. Really like his downward glancing expression, which translates pretty well from the movie. It looks really good from the front. But the only thing I'm noticing with mine is this eye is looking a little bit more down than my other one. Like this one is more of like a standard expression, like this is how I expected and more reminiscent of the film. Well, the other one is starting to go into his face, which is odd. But it's not so bad because when you're looking at it from the front, it doesn't look that bad to be honest, and it's actually fairly reminiscent of what you see in the film. So overall, still works pretty well for me. The only thing I find weird is that he looks like he's kind of grinning. Like something's a little bit funny. Because it's just the way with the curvature of his face on this guy. He just seems like he has like this little, like, not so serious expression. Like he is very glad that he's going to be going to demolish Tokyo. And I just kind of think it's more of an adorable expression that he has going on with this guy. I don't know why. It's just, I can't really take his face that seriously. Like, if you have his mouth open, which on mine is kind of stiff, you actually get him roaring pretty well. And when you have his mouth open, it's not so bad. Like, this is actually a little bit more terrifying looking. But when you have it closed, yeah. But opening it back up real quick, just so you guys can see the little bit of detail I was talking about earlier. With this giant fangs on the front of his mouth, which, just like in the film, looks really good. You also got to see that on the NECA version as well. And I really like the sculpting for the teeth on the inside too. And then he has his little tongue on the inside. But one thing to point out, because you might notice that there's no bone coloring, no white going on, the tongue isn't red, because his overall paint job that he has going on is to replicate the black and white feel that you see from the film, because the film is done in black and white, so of course our kaiju is. Now, with the coloring scheme, it's not quite the same as what we got with the NECA, because the NECA is brighter grays and borderline a whitish gray on the dorsal spines here. While I feel with the paint job for this guy, it's more reminiscent of a lot of the shots that you see in the film because, for the most part, he's not very illuminated. So with the darker coloring for his scales and even with the dorsal spines here, it does help to replicate the feel of the film a lot, I feel. Which also translates with his mouth because his teeth are actually done in the same gray that you see on the dorsal spines. And even his tongue is a slightly... not the same gray as what's going on with his scaling, but it's definitely a darker shade than what we have here with the tongue on mine. Kind of the same as what we got with the pupils going on here, is more or less the same color as what we got with the tongue. So, overall, I like the head sculpt. The one thing I want to point out, though, with this, though, is for this guy, his head looks kind of small to me, at least in comparison to the film. Because with the suit actor, his head would be resting somewhere in the neck right here. And then you have his arms going into Godzilla's arms here. And then the body just kind of hanging off his body. And then the head sits right on top of his head, technically. And in the film, where his neck is, it's actually a fairly large head in comparison to his neck. While this Godzilla is very proportioned. So to me, this feels more like a more accurate representation of the Kaiju in terms of the head sculpt, with the more equal proportions that you have with the rest of his body going with his head than what you get with the actual suit. So he has more of a little bit of a real world monster feel to me. Moving on to his neck, it is slightly elongated with actually a lot of detail going on here, because you can see some of the folds here in the neck where it's kind of contorting a bit, and then it has a little bit of a bulge actually on the more Adam's apple area of Godzilla here. And if you bring his head up even more, it definitely sticks out more. But if you don't want the Adam's apple portion sticking out, you just kind of bring down his head a little bit. And I noticed with the articulation too, is that if you adjust the head or the neck, the top section likes to kind of stick up a little bit. So you have to get it to rest flat to look good with Godzilla's overall head and neck lining. But the details do look really nice too. Same with the body. It's very form-fitting, because unlike the suit in the film, it's actually kind of floppy looking. Like it hangs off the body a little bit and has more squared edges. While the figure here actually is fairly compressed, and again, very proportionate to what I would expect to look from a monster. And same with the arms here too, look really nice. No paint job on the nails though, is something to point out in this guy. But there is a little bit of detail on the inside of the palms, looks really good. Overall, no paint job on the nails isn't really that big of a deal, because with Godzilla scratching his way through buildings and other things in the film, kind of expect the paint to wear eventually, so it kind of translates pretty nicely on the figure here. And also to point out, towards his abdomen region, At least on mine. There's a little bit of a brighter gray here on the stomach area, and it kind of gives him this little bit of a weird lighting going on right there. But it does give him a little bit more color variety on his body too, because without these little subtle, slightly light gray splotches you kind of see here and there, it'd be a very stagnant looking body color scheme. So I do actually really like that. It gives him some nice highlights. And then moving on to his dorsal spines. I actually really love the dorsal spines in this guy. Look very proportionate for what you see in the film, and I really love the cockeyed angles that they're going on. And they have the overall right proportioned shapes. And it kind of looks weird too, because there's this gap here. But that isn't really that actually far off, because even in the film, his dorsal spines aren't really very even. Because it is the first Godzilla suit, so there is going to be some weird little inconsistencies here and there. So with that said, I do really actually think these look nice, and I actually like what they did with the coloring on it, because it's not super bright to be very distracting, but it does have enough standout paint job to give it a little bit of variety with the rest of the body. And even with the tip of the dorsal spines here, they're actually slightly brighter than what you get for the inner sectionings of the spines. There's a lot of nice bumps, grooves, and ridges on the inside of the dorsal spines to give each of them their own little individual characteristics and variety. Has overall 3 dorsal spine platings, but there is some semblance of a 5th row on this one. You can see it a little bit on the outside, but it's not painted on this figure. And it definitely fades off once you get towards the base of the tail, and then it just becomes the 3 dorsal spines running out through the rest of the tail. Which the tail is actually really cool in this guy, just like the GMK. Very posable. Really likes to hold the articulation when you're bending it, which I think is really nice. And the details on it are actually pretty freaking awesome. The one thing that's slightly odd is for this portion of the tail right there, you can see that the spines actually extends on here instead of being on this little plate here. Which kind of works out, because if you want to have it articulating, it kind of makes sense. But when you go to straighten the tail out, looks a little ugly. Another thing to point out, the bottom section of this Godzilla's tail, he does have consistent detail with the rest of his body, where on most of the other Godzillas you get that little rigid sections and it's slightly smoother on the undersection of the tail. And then finally, for his legs, look really nice as well. There's actually a lot of character going on here, because on this leg there's actually what kind of looks like scratches or a little groove lining going on over top of the thigh, and there's some folding of the skin here on the kneecaps, which you don't actually see on the opposite knee. But on the opposite one, you have some folding here on the undersection of the calf here, which looks pretty cool overall. And then we got Godzilla's feet with his 4 toes. Look really nice. And one thing to point out is they're actually painted. Unlike the nails on the hands, they actually have a little bit of a light gray brushing over top of it. And it even translates on a little bit of the toes here as well. So it's kind of odd that they painted those, but didn't actually paint the nails on his hands. Strange. And for his articulation, it's actually pretty impressive on this guy, where his head can look up about that far, down about that far, so you get a pretty crazy bend there. Can look that far to the left, that far to the right. His mouth can open and close, but on mine it is super stiff. You can get his mouth open pretty wide, but you have to arc his head up. So if you want him roaring, it actually looks really good. But his tongue is not actually articulated on this. It's actually fixed on the inside of his mouth. Unlike what we saw with the GMK, which was actually articulated. And then for his arms, can go up about yay far, inwards about that far, can rotate all the way around. Has a pretty good elbow bend. Also, a little bit of rotation here at the elbow. His hand can rotate all the way around. Has a nice play on there, nice rotation. For his waist, can look a little bit side to side, but nothing too crazy. Also, be a little bit wary of the dorsal spines in the back here. I don't really notice anything going on too crazy that could cause some damage, but it's always something just to be a little bit wary of. And then he also has a little bit of a wiggle. And you can bend his body down about that far, so you can really extend the gaps on his back. But again, if you have him looking from forward angles, still looks really nice overall. It's just from the side as a little unsightly, but it's a figure of ball joints. There's going to be something that's going to be a little cockeyed with the figure. It's not going to be perfect. But really nice bend to it, especially with the head articulation too, going full on. That is really crazy looking down. Like he's really scoping out the cars, man. Then for his legs, can move outwards about that far, inwards about that far. Pretty decent forward kick. Really nice back kick. Has a little bit of a bend here at the knee. Nice little rotation at the knee. And for his feet, can also rotate side to side and have a little bit of a pivot to it. And it can move forward about that far, backwards about that far, and you can also rotate here at the upper portion of the thigh. And again, his tail is on individual ball joints for each of these little segments until right here. And I noticed at the tip of my tail is where the ball joint on here really likes to pop off pretty easily. Though right now it's not wanting to show it off. But this section right here is generally where mine pops off on here. But you do get a lot of play with the tail, which is really nice. And I really love the improved articulation we get for the tails for these guys. Unlike what we saw with the Spitfire 2014, where, especially on my show, they all just kind of lay flat, and that's just how it's going to be. So for some quick comparison, here we have the SH MonsterArts 1954 compared next to some Bandai Vinyl 1954s with the Japanese release and the Bandai Creations release. And here is compared next to some SH MonsterArts Godzillas with the newly released GMK Godzilla, who is a freaking beast of a Godzilla compared next to most every other Godzilla. Like, look how he dwarfs him. That's freaking insane. And the SH MonsterArts 1964, who I actually recently got autographed by Akira Takarada. So needless to say, got this guy out to grace your guys' view for this review, but now he's going back into his prison because we don't want to hurt this box anymore. Here's some other Bandai Tamashii figures. The SH Figuarts Ultra Act Manga Ultraman Special Edition, and the SH MonsterArts Mechagodzilla 2 with Garuda, because he hasn't made his way back into my display case yet. So for the moment you guys have been waiting for, here he is, compared next to the NECA Godzilla 1954. Now you guys are probably wondering, what is my opinion on these? Which figure do I think is the better figure? Which, if we're going to compare apples to apples and do both of these guys on equal playing fields, of course the SH Monster one's better. Like, it's got more articulation, better sculpt, done by Yuji Sakai. It's from Japan. Like, there's everything, you got everything literally going on with this figure that is amazing. Granted, it's more money, but it's more money. You get more out of the figure because you're paying more for it. And for $20, of course, this guy is not going to be up to par as what we have here. Now, if we compare apples to, say, bananas, like we should be, because I don't feel like these guys should really be on the same playing field, because these two aren't essentially like, probably a good comparison would be third-party Transformers with Masterpiece Transformers. Because, for instance, there is a Masterpiece Megatron, and then we have a crap ton of third-party Megatrons that are trying to replace the Takara Megatron. Which, that, I could say you could easily compare the figures because they're all on the same playing field because they all want to be Masterpiece Transformers. Now, the NECA Godzilla here is not trying to be a MonsterArts figure. It's not trying to be in scale with any other MonsterArts figure going on. So it's not really fair to say that this guy is trying to compete with this guy. But then again, there's not like there's other monsters really compared to the 54 because he's the only one in the movie. So I can see most people just wanting a certain 54 to be in their collection. Which I do think there is merits to both of these guys being in your collection, because just as I said, this guy's from a certain toy line, meant to go with other figures from that toy line. Same with this guy. But if you guys are just looking for a 1954 Godzilla to be in your collection, this is probably the best way I could say it. If you're looking for something fairly inexpensive, want something that is a little bit more suit accurate, because yes, I will say that my Band-Aid is falling off my finger, and that the NECA version is actually slightly more suit accurate with the larger head, the more loose form-fitting body, because you can see right here, it's definitely a lot more angled, like what you see in the film. And I think just in terms of size and scale, because he even is the slightly bigger figure, I think he just works better for a more suit representation of the kaiju. Except for he has a shorter tail and dorsal spines are slightly smaller than what you see in the movie. But overall, I think he replicates it pretty nicely. And he's only 20 bucks and pretty easy to acquire at most Toys R Us, FYEs, any place that really sells NECA action figures stateside. So if you guys don't like shipping in figures and don't want to spend too much money and want a nice suit accurate Godzilla, I'd say go for this guy, personally. But if you want a great representation of the Godzilla 1954, not saying suit, but just the kaiju himself, then I would say go with the MonsterArts one. Especially if you have more money, you can splurge on figures. Because this guy is the better sculpt, definitely has better articulation, and has really nice proportions in comparison to what the figure is going on with. So he's just a cleaner looking Godzilla, which is something you're going to expect out of the MonsterArts line. So if you guys are looking for just a good suit accurate Godzilla figure and want articulation, not spend a whole lot of money on it, go with the NECA one. If you guys want a really great representation of the 1954 Godzilla and really want super articulation and have a little bit more money to spend on your figures, go with the MonsterArts one. Pretty much easiest way to say it, buy what you want, buy what you love. So to conclude this review, which one do I personally prefer? Out of my preferences for what I'm looking for in a figure, I actually really like the SH MonsterArts version. Now, I know I said in the NECA 54 review that if SH MonsterArts put out a 1954 Godzilla, it's not needed. And granted, I still don't think that this figure is really needed, but since it came out, saying I'm really into the MonsterArts line, I'm gonna buy it anyways. And to be honest, I really love the articulation for this guy. It's definitely a step above what we got with the NECA version, even though the NECA version is still really nicely articulated. Of course, the MonsterArts one is definitely going to be the superb version. Really like the sculpt in this guy and like that he's a really good representation of the 1954 Godzilla. Might not be quite suit accurate, but still really awesome looking. Love the paint job on it, even though it has like one little hiccup with the eye. It's not a big deal. And I think it's just another great addition to the SH MonsterArts line. So if you guys are looking for a really nice looking representation of the 1954 Godzilla, want awesome articulation and have a little bit of extra money to spend, then definitely pick up the SH MonsterArts 1954 Godzilla before the Oxygen Destroyer removes them from the shelves. But what do you guys think? Have you guys picked up the SH MonsterArts Godzilla 1954? Which version of the 1954 movie do you prefer? Is NECA just more your thing? Please let us know in the comments. We'll closer picture of this guy on Facebook. You want to click the link description below and help us defeat those kaijus by hitting that like button, subscribe, become a ranger today, and see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.